hold on, he's got it.
I'm DeGreer Harris.
I'm Chelsea Cole. Could you say your name?
I'm Ed Woods. This is my
Carol
wife,
Woods.
Carol.
All right. The first question is, where and when were you born?
I was born here in Atlanta, Grady Hospital, 1942.
Okay. Who were your parents and what were their occupations?
My parent,
Oh no. Go ahead.
okay, my mother and father, neither finished high school. Daddy went in the Army, and it was suggested that he go in the Army. He did not live a very righteous life, so he went in the Army and landed at Normandy and went through France into Germany for the World War II liberation. At the time, I was born, meantime I was born, and mother was working, she worked for the Bell Bomber Plant, which is now Lockheed. She was an actual Rosie the Riveter type person. And she worked there until after the war, and then not long after that, they were divorced, and I was a single parent child. No brothers, no sisters.
Okay. What were you doing before you entered the military, the service?
I was working and going to college,
What college did you go to?
Georgia Tech.
What were you studying?
What was I studying? At that time, I was studying mechanical engineering.
Okay.
So were you drafted or did you enlist yourself?
Good question. I was working 40 hours a week, going to school at night, carrying 10 hours, which is not, that's 2 one-hour classes a night, 2 hours a night. And I got drafted, and because I wasn't going full time, 12 hours was full time. And so I got a draft notice. This was in December of '63. And on the campus at Tech, they have a Marine Corps, Navy Reserve Center, or they did have, they don't now. And I said, you know, I don't play in the dirt real well. The Army is not what I want to do. So I joined the Navy, thinking I'm going to see the world. And instead, they assigned me to Seabees, and I was attached to the 3rd Marine Division. Never got on a boat.
And the Seabees is?
The Seabees are the construction unit for the United States Navy. We built everything that had to be done for the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps had engineers, but the Marine Corps did not have builders. They did not have construction people. And so the Seabees were assigned to the Marines, just as they don't have any medical forces. They're medics or corpsmen, which are Navy. That's what I did.
Do you think that your background in mechanical engineering that you're going to for Georgia Tech for is part of the reason why you were put in this division of the Navy?
No, I don't think so. I think that I think that I don't remember, okay, whether the reserve unit was a CB reserve unit or not. I think it was a CB reserve unit, which was automatically put you in the CBs. And in a way, I'm very glad that happened, because it gave me an opportunity to learn something that I could do after the military. Military was not an option for me to stay in.
Mm-hmm. What do you remember the first few days after you were enlisted? Or well, after you were drafted?
What do I remember?
Yeah, like, well, the first few days after, I guess, you've arrived to where you needed to be?
Okay. When I enlisted, I got a 2-year college deferment. So that kept me in this country for 2 more years so I could work on my degree, okay? Which I still didn't finish. That's another story, but I still didn't finish it at the time. And so I went on active duty in January of '66, 2 years after I actually enlisted. When I first went on active duty, I had to go to what the Navy calls A school. And A school is simply nothing no more than to teach you how to do what you have signed up or you have obligated yourself to do. I had signed up to be what they call a builder. A builder is nothing no more than a carpenter or a framer, as you know, they're building houses around. That's what I wanted to do, and it was fine. They had plumbers, they had electricians, they had heavy equipment operators, they had mechanics. I wanted to do this. I don't know why. And so then after A school, left A school, and Carol and I went to California. As soon as I got to California, this was in May of 66. As soon as I got to California, I was ready to be shipped to Vietnam. My outfit was going, but yet they had not put me in combat training. I had not know any combat training. So they kept me back along with probably half a dozen or so other guys, and we went through 2 weeks of combat training. And then she stayed in California. I flew to Vietnam.
What did it feel like? Did you feel unprepared or scared or?
No, not really. I didn't know what to feel. It's a good question. Didn't know what to feel. I had no idea. You got to understand that we had been in Vietnam as a country, well, for a long time, for 8 to 10 years, but not in a combat basis. And when I first flew into Vietnam, I never will forget. I flew into Da Nang, which Da Nang is in the northern part of South Vietnam. I flew into Da Nang, and the plane came in low, and we didn't take any fire, but you could look out the window, and there was a firefight going. It was at night, and there was a firefight going on. The Marines had engaged either the Viet Cong or the North Vietnam in a firefight, and that was my first experience of this is real. These people are serious about this stuff. And we landed, and it was in May, June, and God, was it hot. And I was born right here, but I've never been that hot before. It was just an experience, a smell that I cannot describe, because you had a lot of things going on. You had artillery, you had napalm, you had a porta potty is soup. That's a Hilton hotel to them. Okay, a porta potty. Okay, so you had all of this going on. You had just a whole array of aromas and smells and everything, gunpowder, the whole bit. So I said, just get me out of this mess, okay? And so I reported that night to my camp, woke up the next morning, and was immediately signed to guard duty. And I said, okay. So I had an M14 at the time, and they pointed me in the direction and gave me a briefing on what to do and how to control that little corner. My guard duty station was about half the size of this room, okay? And that was mine for a month, 6 weeks, something like that. And I was there at night, and I was there during the day. My first camp was a relatively safe camp. It was on the the name was a coastal city. The airstrip ran north and south, and my camp was on the west side of the airstrip. I mean, I could see the airstrip from my security station, my guard station. So, I felt comfortably safe. At that time, yeah. Does that answer your question?
Definitely. So, I guess more so tell me about your boot camp experience or the 2 weeks of training that you had to do before.
Okay. I went to boot camp in 1964. It was regular, typical. I was already in the reserves, and it was a typical deal. I was going to go to boot camp, So I went to boot camp, went to Great Lakes, which is in Illinois, just north of Chicago. Rode the train from, that was an experience. Rode the train from Atlanta to Chicago, and then we transferred off of the train onto like their MARTA, their rapid transit, whatever. We went up to Great Lakes. It was a typical boot camp experience, okay? You learn how to be a man. You guys, just like your responsibility lies in you right now. They don't allow you any responsibilities. They tell you what you're going to do and what time you're going to do it. Whatever, but it was a learning experience. The combat training I had in California before I left to go to Vietnam was simply, they called it combat training, but honestly it was simply no more than going to the firing range every day, learning how to shoot my weapon, learning how to throw grenades, learning how to shoot mortars, learning the different types of weapons, and that was basically combat training for me. Not very intense. I had intense combat training a year after that. After I already spent 9 months in Vietnam, I had intense combat training again.
Were you physically and mentally ready for what you found when you went to boot camp?
To boot camp?
I know that's not your question. Yes.
Yeah, I was really, because I didn't know what to expect. When you go to these things, you guys are learning, okay? But when you go to boot camp, you go to combat training, or you go to ranger school, you go to paratrooper school, you go to SEAL training, you go to all of these various things. You have absolutely, you think you know, but you don't know. I'm just telling you. You go to Parris Island, or you go to San Diego, you go to all the different Fort Benning and Army. You think you know, but you don't know. So it becomes a rude awakening.
How did you get past that, sudden, your rude awakening of, the realization settling in that this isn't what you expected?
Well, when I went to boot camp, it's really interesting. I was the only one there with college. Okay? We're talking, the rest of the recruits were high school. And I have to tell you, I don't know. Some of them even finished high school. I don't know. But I was the only one there with college. So I was made the DI's master at arms. I had a position. I didn't like the position. He gave me a little levity, but the point was I was able to, my job was to, after all the recruits left to go to class in the morning, was to make sure that their beds were made, or the showers were clean, the bathrooms were clean. I didn't clean them, I had to make sure. And then if it wasn't done, or the bed wasn't made, or this wasn't done, then I had to tell the DI, what about it? Then I reported back to class. This was in the summer of '64, and we went into, our classrooms were probably 60 degrees. Not exaggerating, to keep you awake. People, when you're in a situation like that, you get up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you're ready to go to sleep. You're tired from walking, running, whatever. You're tired. So my job was to keep them awake in the classroom. Well, heck, I was falling asleep myself, you know. But I also understood, this is what a lot of people didn't understand, that the DI that woke us up at 5 o'clock in the morning, he'd been up an hour. And he went to bed an hour after he put us in bed. So I know for every 4 hours sleep we got, he got 3 hours sleep or 2 hours sleep. I don't know how those guys make it. Plus they gotta be mean at the same time.
Okay. Do you remember any of your instructors from your boot camp or combat training experiences?
My boot camp instructor, I'll never forget him. His last name was Boss of all things, and he was a first class petty officer. In combat training, the first combat training I had a Marine gunny sergeant teaching us. He was an old fella, and I think he sort of didn't like what he was doing, and he just wanted to make sure we got through combat training. He'd been in the Marines a long time, and he was as high up as he was gonna go, and that's fine. He served in Korea and then World War II, and he was tired. But nothing, I come home from combat training at night, she was there. It wasn't no big deal. You just go out to the beach, the firing range was on the beach, because you're shooting out in the water. The facility we was at was right on the beach, right on the harbor. So it wasn't no big deal. I was Navy, remember?
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
Were there many casualties in your unit?
Honey, I can't hear you.
Were there many casualties in your unit?
Yes. Let me get into this a little bit further. The first time I went to Vietnam, I was in a construction battalion, Seabees. Construction battalion made up of about 500 to 600 people. When we went to Vietnam, we were stationed at a base camp, but we went out of the wire beyond our base camp every day. Our job was to build and support any Marine facility around. On our first tour, nothing happened. We came home, all 600 of us went, all 600 of us came back, type deal, okay? Interestingly, I came home in February, first tour 1967. A friend of mine was in the battalion that replaced us. I say friend, he was in my reserve unit in Atlanta. He was assigned after boot camp and day school, he was assigned to another battalion. Well, the battalion, you had a battalion here. When this battalion came back to the States, he was replaced with another battalion to keep the work constantly going. He was killed in March of '67 on the same roads, same thing I'd done. I just lucked out, okay? But he and 2 other CVs were killed in a Jeep, ran over a road mine. On my second tour, I came home on December the 9th. The detail I was attached to in January '68, I'd already come home, but they were still there. They went to Khe Sanh, and I don't know if y'all read anything about Khe Sanh or even know where it's at. But Khe Sanh was the northern westernmost outpost in South Vietnam. It was probably the most heated battle of all South Vietnam. But my detail of about 20 some odd guys was there. I didn't. I came home. I was exited the Navy. My tour was up. I came home. My first class petty officer was killed in Khe Sanh. So that nobody that I was directly attached to at the time was killed. We had injuries, but we got rocketed, we got mortared, had a B-52 drop his bombs within a mile of us. So, you know, these things are eye-awakening, you know. Anything else?
Could you tell me about some of your memorable experiences?
Some of my military, I can't hear you.
Memorable experiences?
Well, I had to go along with, you know, probably half a dozen other guys. We had to go work at a scout and sentry dog camp. Now, what's memorable about that is getting attached to the dogs. The dogs were they were normalized, they were, what's a good word, docile, they were just good animals, okay? But as soon as that trainer tells them to attack, they attack. And I found out there was two different kind of dogs. There's a scout dog and there's a sentry dog. Scout dog goes out with the guys and searches for everything. A sentry dog basically patrols the area, and they're trained differently. What I found out when we was there working was that none of those dogs, unlike today, were allowed to come home. They were all left in Vietnam. None of them were allowed to. Supposedly, can't tell you this for a fact, okay? Supposedly they didn't want any type of disease or illness or whatever that those animals may have incurred to come back into this country, which now the animals are protected for that. And we got shot at quite a bit there. That was I mean, we're sitting there working on what I call a 16 by 32. A 16 by 32 is simply nothing no more than a hooch of where the guys slept at night. This was their living quarters. And we built those, and while we were building them, we got shot at quite a bit. You just wait till the sniper goes away, and because you have no clue where you're getting shot from. You just, oh, he's over there. Well, he's in the woods. What are you going to do? You're going to shoot in the woods. You don't know where you're shooting at. He knows what he's shooting at, but you don't know what you're shooting at. You know, and then he goes away, and then you go back to work. You know, and the Marines surrounded us. They protected us, and God, I love the Marines, you know, because that's just who I was with. That was probably my most memorable experience, you know, as far as, I had some others, but that was my most memorable.
What kind of friendships did you form serving and with whom?
I'm still keeping up with some of them, okay? After 50 some odd years. Keep up with them. I have one guy that I stay real close to. He lives in northern Michigan. One guy lives in northern California. I think Robinson lives in southern California, I think. But anyway, we still keep up with emails. We still keep up with Facebook. And this is not once a month type deal. It's a communication all the time, you know. We still do. We know, and then there's some that I have no clue what happened to them afterwards, you know. When I left the service, when I exited the Navy, okay, I came home alone. Nobody in my outfit came with me. They stayed there. That was just, I did not come back with my battalion. So do you understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
How did you stay in touch with your family and friends back home? And for you, how was it here when he was gone? Like, how did you?
You know, I think that you find adventure, because you only go that way one time. You really don't know what, like we've talked about, we didn't know what to expect. And when the 2 weeks after we got to California, and it was, that Ed was getting ready to go to Vietnam, and I thought, okay, so now what I do? So what you do is you just were given that special mind to be able to move on. You're strong enough to say, I can find my way. Was very lonely. I was sad. I didn't really know if he was going to come back or what condition he was going to come back in. So there was real challenges there, and it was lonely because I was there and in a foreign country, so to say. California can be a foreign country, but I found a job. I worked there and made friends there, and I think the biggest support group, because anywhere you go in life, you need a support group. You need something to hold on to, and I think that the wives and the children of the wives were very helpful, as well as hopefully I was helpful to them. And we would see the guys going in, each battalion would take their turn as far as the rotation going to Vietnam, and you would be able to be with a certain group 9 months, and then you wouldn't be with them. And so there was a void there that you had to be strong enough to.
We had no children at the time.
And we chose not to.
Just us.
We chose not to, but
She had one child.
I did. Still have. But anyway, the challenges are there, but challenges are a good thing. That's what makes you strong. It makes you, I don't know, it just gives you strength.
Were you a prisoner of war? If so, then can you tell me your experiences?
No, I was not a prisoner of war. Actually came probably nowhere close to even being a prisoner of war. No. I know a guy that was a prisoner of war, other than the stories he told and what I've read, which may be the same things that y'all have read. No, I don't. I don't know.
Were you awarded any medals?
I did not. I did not get what we call hero medals. Okay, I got some accommodation medals. I got combat action ribbons. I got, put it bluntly, basically the typical ribbons that the Navy and the Marine Corps award. Okay, if you were in a unit that was as good as my unit, and my unit was, I will say this, and I'll say it, they were the #1 unit of the Navy battalions. I was awarded the Navy Commendation Medal. There were some guys in my unit, the ones that went to Quezon, were awarded the Presidential Unit Citation for the work that they had done up there. That's the highest unit award you can get. I was awarded other unit accommodations, but there were 13, at the time of the Vietnam War, there were 13 active battalions. Okay, a battalion consisted of 5 to 6, we okay?
Yeah, we're good.
500 to 600 men. And they rotated in and out of Vietnam. At any particular time, you could have 4, maybe 5 battalions in Vietnam, in different places in Vietnam. My battalion was the very first battalion to arrive in Vietnam, and that was in May of '65. I was not with them at the time, gladly, but they arrived in Vietnam with the 3rd Marine Division and the landing just north of Da Nang. I arrived with them on their second trip and on their 3rd trip. That's how a battalion was. It's just a bunch of guys going and coming back, going and coming back. And she, familiarized herself with the families, the wives, the children of the people in my battalion. And there were other battalions there still too that replaced us. The overlapping was different.
While you were at home, what did you guys do to keep yourselves occupied?
What did we do at home?
When you were off duty?
Go get pizza.
Oh.
No, we would go to Los Angeles to see the Atlanta Braves.
We,
We
we,
would go up into the mountains. We would go to the beach. We would,
we lived in an area, we lived in Ventura County, California, which is about an hour's north of Los Angeles and about an hour south of can't think of it,
Santa Barbara.
Huh?
Santa Barbara.
Santa Barbara. And we knew or we felt like we would never be there again. So we'd get in our little Volkswagen and we'd go to Los Angeles. We'd go right around Hollywood, see if we could get the map of the stars, homes of the stars, check them out. We would do things that young people would do. And just
It was the highway. We would go down around the
Highway 101, it's right there right now. See it every movie they make, they have a film scene on Highway 1. I said, we were there. But you do those things, and then sometimes at night, I said, go get pizza. There was a pizza parlor real close, and they had family style tables. So you'd sit there and you'd eat pizza with somebody you didn't have a clue who it was, but you got to know them. You just sit there and eat pizza and drink beer, and you'd have a good time. We just did things. We did crazy things. Took a weekend trip up to San Francisco, went to how we wound up in that, I'll never know. I'm right between tours in Vietnam, and we wound up in a peace-in setting, going to that. I wanted to see what it looked like, people protesting the war. I wanted to see what.
Berkeley.
We were at Berkeley, and I stayed away from it. We stayed far enough away because we had very short hair, and it was very obvious I was military. And
It was quite an eye-opener as far as when we got back from Vietnam. It was a matter of all the protesting and whatever, but it was certainly an eye-opener to go to Berkeley and just be able to see what was really thought about and talked about here while he was there.
Mhm.
It was reality.
So what was that transition like, coming back from the war and going back into your normal life, like, per se?
when I left my base camp, which was my base camp at the time when I exited the Navy, which is where we're going, okay? I was up on the DMZ. I could see North Vietnam from my camp. I could see the DMZ. I could see the Indian Ocean over here. At night, we would sit there and watch the New Jersey sitting out in the Indian Ocean, firing in support of a Marine outpost or whatever in North Vietnam, in the DMZ, I'm sorry. I drove down, I don't remember how I got down there, but I rode on some truck, I don't know what. And went to Da Nang, and that's where we flew out of. That was where all of the combat forces that were exiting the service at the time, or they're exiting active duty at the time, or exiting Vietnam, their time served, we all met there, and there was this big 707 sitting there, and it had my name on it. And never forget that. It was a Golden Tail. It was Continental Airlines. They had a Golden Tail at the time. And I saw all these guys. We're talking Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine. We saw all these guys, and they're all in greens, just like I am. And I was at the back of the line, and they took you by alphabet. So I'm at the back of the line. And first time my alphabet ever helped me on my name, okay? I rode first class all the way back. They loaded the plane from the back. Everybody had to walk all the way back, and by the time I got on, only seats left were sitting in first class. Now, we didn't get drinks, don't get me wrong, but
But it
we
was
had
first
big
class.
seats, okay? And flew from Da Nang to, I believe it was Norton Air Force Base, which was just north of Los Angeles. Snowing this is December the 11th, somewhere along 11th, 12th of December, snowing in California. First time it had snow in 30 some odd years. She met me at the airfield, immediately took me from there. We went to the hotel. She'd already had everything packed, ready to go home. That was my experience. I'll never forget that, because when we came back, I'd heard horror stories, people getting spit on, people whatever. I never experienced that. She made sure that I was taken care of immediately getting off, because once you got off the plane, you were dispersed into different areas. You could go on anywhere, okay? And she was there, met me. We got in our little red Volkswagen, and back home we came. We stopped, spent a night in Las Vegas. I remember that one. To see Lou Rawls Christmas show, and we drove on back to Atlanta, and I exited active duty from the Naval Air Station, which is now Dobbins Air Force Base, on December the 23rd. And from that point on, unless I was asked, I never talked about Vietnam. You can't imagine, that was a 12-hour flight. That's all it is, 12 hours, okay? You can't imagine what's going on over there versus what's going on over here. It's just, you just can't conceive that there's that kind of situation. And it is. I mean, we were losing, on an average, almost 24 men a day, dying. The largest loss was in March 1968. We lost 38 men in one day. That's hard to conceive. That's extremely hard to conceive. And I saw that. I loaded body bags. I loaded dead Marines or soldiers, and took them off the helicopters and put them on the ground so the helicopter could go back. It's hard to imagine going from war to whether you want a chocolate milkshake or you want a vanilla milkshake or you want a pizza and a beer or what. It's two different worlds.
So where were you when you found out that the war had ended?
We were living in Atlanta. I can't honestly tell you where I was. I did not keep up with any. When I left Vietnam, and I didn't keep up with anything at all on Vietnam after I left. I know that I stayed in the reserves 2 more years to fill my obligation. I had to do a 6-year obligation. I stayed in reserve 2 more years. During that 2-year period, one of our friends that lived in Massachusetts at the time that I was in with, he went back to his reserve unit. His reserve unit was called back up, and mine wasn't. My reserve unit was not called up. But I told her, I said, I'm out of here. I want no more. I'm done. Because at that time we didn't know whether you was going to be called back up, what was going on, or anything like that. I can't. When I left Vietnam, like I said, I left it.
So how did you readjust to civilian life once you got back? Like, after you're the transition that you talked about, like, did you go to get a job immediately, or how'd you go about readjusting?
When I left, when I went in on active duty and left my job, I was working for the City of Atlanta Water Department. I was classified an engineer. Okay, really what I was a surveyor. Okay, and but that's what my job was. I came back and went right back into my job. She went to work for a local bank. But I went right back into my job, stayed there 5 months, and then I really had no problem transitioning back. Like I said, I forgot Vietnam. I didn't want to remember it. And when I left after 5 months of that, I saw an ad in the paper for they needed engineers at Ford Motor Company. Although I hadn't graduated from college at the time, I considered myself an engineer. So I applied for a job with them, and I retired after 31 years with Ford Motor Company. So I really had no transitioning issues at all. I didn't. Later in life, things became different, but at the time, no.
Are you a member of any veteran organizations?
Yes, I am. In fact, I belong to two veteran organizations. I belong to the Atlanta Vietnam Veterans Business Association, which is probably the largest veterans organization in the Georgia area. And I also, for kicks, as it turned out, is about what it's turned out to be. A bunch of us guys from Mount Bethel United Methodist Church meet once a month, and it's not a church setting, it's a Mexican restaurant. But it's a fun setting where we can all get together. There's about 50 or 60 of us, and we have Mexican food and drink beer.
Do y'all talk about y'all time in the war, or y'all just?
We lie to each other, honey. You wouldn't believe how much we lie. But we do everything we're supposed to do. We pledge allegiance, sing the national anthem, have an outstanding prayer, and then we have about a 5, maybe 10-minute program where someone has been chosen to talk at night, and it gives him a chance. And I should say her as well. We have a couple of ladies that served in Vietnam there as well, but it gives them a chance to talk, and it's really more of a robust, fun deal. Okay, and we sit together, and like I said, we eat Mexican food and drink beer, and then 7 o'clock, 7:30, get up and go home, and that time is over with. But I have the other organization that I'm in, the biggest one I'm in, is it's where I'm able to volunteer. I do volunteer with Atlanta History Center, doing exactly what you kids are doing, and I thoroughly enjoy it. I've learned a lot.
I think it's a healing process
It's a healing.
for him, as well as all the other guys that he meets with. I think anything he does in the last maybe 10 years.
She asked me, I've been a part of an organization 10 years, and she asked me, she said, why are you all of a sudden, we're talking about just over a short period of time, why are you all of a sudden talking about your Vietnam experiences? I said, nobody's ever asked, and nobody ever cared. Nobody ever cared what the Vietnam veteran went through. Quite honestly, nobody really cares about the Korean veteran. He's a forgotten person. And these are people we can't forget. Just can't forget them. And, I'm able to do things that helps. I did an interview yesterday. I did an interview Friday, just like you guys are doing, with people that I didn't know, didn't have the slightest idea who they were. I knew it from the form that I filled out for y'all. I already had that form, so I knew what I was looking at when I, had them. So I enjoyed that. I do.
Okay. What have you done, significantly in your life since separating yourself from the, or just leaving the service?
What have you done since after you left the service?
Oh, I've had fun. I finished school. I actually got 2 degrees, but I did not do any graduate work. I did undergraduate work. I didn't want to. I hated it. I was tired. I was not a good student. Okay, you kids are good students. You got direction. I was not a good student. Barely got out of high school, and but I finished my degree work while I was working. I got a good job, and it was with Ford Motor Company, and I worked myself up pretty well up into the company, and had some reasonable managerial roles. We had 2 children, 2 girls. When they were growing up, they wanted to play soccer, so I learned how to play soccer myself. And I coached them for 15 years in soccer, and so we did that. She was a part of the PTA, PTSA in the grammar school, elementary school, all the way up through high school. I retired from Ford in October '99, and I've had, since then, I've had 2 part-time jobs, stay busy, and we lived in, I didn't tell you this, but '94 we moved to Virginia. I was transferred, took a promotional transfer to the assembly plant in Virginia, in Norfolk. We got to meet a lot of other military people there because that's a concentrated military area. And then we had our granddaughter, so we moved back here in '05. In '09 or '10, somewhere along there, I started writing my memoirs, and I stayed consistent with that until I finished it about a year ago. And I did a lot of ancestry work. Wanted to learn some stuff about my family, you know, where are they from, you know, whatever. That's what I've done, you know. Have had a lot, and I may have drank a beer or 2, you know. I don't know.
I just have a few reflection questions. How did your war experience affect your life? Like,
How did my work?
War experience affect your life?
Going back, I did not let Vietnam affect my life, okay? I chose not to, and you can choose otherwise. You can do whatever you want to, but I did not let Vietnam affect my life. I was diagnosed with PTSD, and as you've been able to tell, I'm hard of hearing. And I don't know whether that's old age. I was attached to 2 artillery companies, so I think that had a little bit to do with it. The VA thinks it does, so I can't, I chose not to. I chose, we attended, we've had season tickets to Braves games. We had for 43 years season tickets to Georgia Tech football games and basketball games. So we occupied our lives with that. We occupied our lives with our daughters in high school and everywhere they went, whatever. One of them went to University of North Carolina, one of them went to Georgia Tech. So we was tied in with those kids doing their things. You can allow things to happen or not. You make the choice.
What are some life lessons you learned from the military service?
Don't volunteer for anything.
Discipline.
Huh?
Discipline.
Discipline. I learned discipline. I was raised by a single parent, and my mother was very disciplined. She disciplined me to the point that I was able to get away with a lot. Okay, but I wasn't.
Because his grandmother let him.
I wasn't a bad kid. I had absolutely. I did not envision getting in trouble. That was not something I wanted. I could not imagine. I've never had a mugshot made, never had any of that. So I was a good kid, okay? Mother did take my driver's license for 30 days for something I did. I don't know. I remember that. But I learned discipline. I learned how to be a man.
Respect.
I learned respect is good. I learned that you respect your people, regardless of who they are. Everybody gets respect. Everybody deserves respect. You may or may not agree with what that person tells you that they want you to do. But first off, if that person is superior to you, or your boss, let's say that, then you do what they tell you to do, and you do it in a timely manner. But I learned respect, and I learned that everybody should have an opportunity, and only, as I told the class, and I think maybe y'all were sitting in the class, I don't know, you make the choice. You got choices to make, and you make those choices. You can make a good choice or a bad choice. I made, in my opinion, I made all good choices, except I didn't work hard enough in school. In high school, I did not. I thought I was, hey, I'm fine. Well, I really wasn't. I did okay. I lucked out on a lot of things.
How has your military experience impacted your feelings about war?
How did that, my military experience?
Affect you as far as
Your feelings about war,
your feelings about war?
About war.
or the military in general?
I think that we can get into politics a lot here, okay? First off, I'm very well satisfied that I've researched it enough to know that we, as Americans, did not need to be involved in Vietnam, okay? That was a mistake. That was a political mistake. I'm satisfied with that. I'm concerned that, and me and her have sat in the back talking before, Afghanistan is the same thing today as Vietnam was then. There are people that are very oppressed, okay? Very oppressed. But I think we have a lot of people in this country that are very oppressed, don't have an opportunity to see. And I'm not foolish to sit here and say that we can all, if I put you to sleep,
No.
that we all have the same opportunity. We don't have the same opportunity. There's kids out there right now that nowhere near have the opportunities you guys have got, and you need to take advantage of those opportunities. You need to do that. That's important. We were blown away when we came into school this morning at this school, and we were associated with our daughters. Our daughters went to a very high-end public school in Cobb County. It's one of the top public schools in the state of Georgia, but it isn't this. Don't get me wrong. And then 2 weeks I got to go talk to Levitt. I know those kids are different altogether from you. Kids have got to work for what you got. And I know I'm going off on a tangent, and I understand that. But war, we should not have done Vietnam.
Well, how do you feel about if we should think about going to ever another war?
Let me
Do
tell
you
you
feel
something.
like that's something that needs?
War is not romantic. I know you guys probably played, we did, I'll say that, we played cowboys and Indians when I was growing up. We played war, we get together, because y'all got electronic stuff, y'all do that all on electronics now. When you see somebody that's been shot and blown all to pieces, that's not romantic. That's not in the backyard anymore. I think that we have to do these things to protect what rights we have, but I think we have to be very cautious in how we do that. A lot of the people that are making decisions to go to war have never carried a gun in their life.
What message would you like to leave for future generations who will view and hear this interview?
I can elaborate on a lot of things, okay? And it goes back to our experience, our experience with high school, because I worked with high school kids for a long time, with our daughters and our soccer teams, and just having written my memoirs, and I've done that. Your life depends on what you choose to do with it. A lot of people, and I shouldn't say this, but I'm gonna say it anyhow. There's a lot of attention not given to homeless veterans, okay? There's gonna be homeless people no matter what, whether they're veterans are non-veterans. There's gonna be homeless people. There's gonna be people that made that choice. That guy that came home from Vietnam on the same plane I did, he had a choice. There were things that may have influenced his choice, but he had a choice to either go to college, go to a technical school, stay in the military, do something to improve his life or to keep his life on the military puts you on a plateau, and you have to decide to stay there. You can go down or you can go up. But the military puts you on a plateau where whatever you do in there, it's going to be good. The military is a great experience. Whether you choose to go into an elite unit or you choose to go into a basic Army or Marine Corps unit or a basic, you want to be a sailor or whatever, they're going to keep you on that plateau. And if you choose to go into an elite unit like a SEAL or a Ranger or whatever, or Marines think they're elite, but they're not. They're just old guys like us, okay? But if you choose, they will rise you up to another level, okay? Then you got to decide whether you want to stay at that level or you decide you want to go down. I don't think, I'm looking around at y'all, and I don't think any of y'all want to do that. I think your expectations of each other are high. And that, I think that I've talked to my girls. We had one disciplinary procedure that we used. If one of them did something that we didn't like, and this was when they were little, I would not react physically, okay? I say, you go to your room and you sit there and I'll be back there later. Well, that was before everybody had a TV or a phone or whatever. So they'd go back there, and they're two little girls, the heinies ain't no bigger than that, and they don't know what to expect when Dad comes back there, because I did handle the disciplinary as far as that goes. And I would only go back there, and I can only remember one time I spanked one of them, okay? But I let her sit there and think about it for about 30 minutes. And how you react as adults to your kids growing up is most important, and don't give them everything they want. Give them what they earned. The military taught me a lot. I think that everybody, and y'all, every one of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of you, I can count that high. I don't know how to spell, but I can count that high. All of you are probably not going to agree with me, but I think everybody ought to serve a minimum of 6 months in the military. Whether it's in the military uniform or it's in a peacekeeping situation where I just think that there's got to be, that's discipline to do that.
Is there anything you feel like we haven't discussed that you want to add to the interview?
No, I think y'all have done an exceptional job. And I know, I say I know, I've got this feeling that y'all didn't have a clue what a CB was before I walked in here, okay? I'm not a Marine, I'm not a pilot, I'm not a sailor, I went on a carrier, but when you join the service, you find out how many different things there are, what's going on. Do you know, just for an example, why the only SEAL team you've ever heard of was SEAL Team 6? Don't know. SEAL Team 6, when SEAL Team 6 was formed, this is a fact. When SEAL Team 6 was formed, the government didn't want our rogue nations, the enemy nations, to know how many SEAL teams we had, okay? So the first SEAL team became SEAL Team 6, rather than SEAL Team 1. Now, there are other SEAL teams out there now, but they were the first one, SEAL Team 6. They're the most decorated one. The CBs were formed in 1942 to support Marines in the Island War with Japan, going up, starting in Tarawa and going all the way up into Okinawa, Iwo Jima. We were sent to support them, build the airstrips. There's so many different things, so many. If you want to join the military, there's something out there for you to do. And right now, I doubt if I could have gotten in the military for as dumb as I was, you know, I don't know. Do you have any more questions? I could load you up with answers for everything. Should fuss at me.
I don't think so. But thank you for taking time out of your day to come answer some of the. Oh, well.
We haven't stopped
Image
yet.
file.
Yeah, image is perfect.
Well, thanks for taking time out of your days to come speak with us and answer some questions. And we've both learned a lot. Well, all of us have learned a lot from what you said. And yeah, what you said about the CV coming in, we didn't know what that was, and leaving now we have a lot more insight into your experience and some of the experiences of military personnel during the Vietnam War, which was really insightful. So
The Vietnam, you could, are we off camera? Are we still
No.
off camera?
Oh, you can end it.
We can end it.
No.
Don't end it.
No.
Go ahead.
Have any of y'all watched, are we off camera?
No.
Huh?
Would you like me
No,
to turn
you leave it on, it's fine, I
Okay.
don't care, I don't care. If anybody's watched the Ken Burns special on PBS, okay, I do recommend that you watch it, okay? As a veteran, I was highly aggravated by the Ken Burns special. Ken Burns knows about baseball, he did a good baseball series. He knows about the Civil War, he did a good Civil War series. But he didn't know jack about Vietnam, okay? And I want you to watch it because I want you to understand, it's like, what, 18 hours? 18 hours.
Probably. They have to study though,
You have to study.
and sleep.
But Ken Burns,
Eat.
Ken Burns chose to choose, he chose a liberal point of view for the war. This was the problem with the war at the time. The papers did not give the servicemen, that's why we were treated so badly when we came back. It was the papers, the media. Ken Burns, the first 3 episodes were about the historical events that led up to the Vietnam War, and then after that, his portrayal was not that, but I think you should see it, just so you get a different perspective. And you'll be interviewing other Vietnam veterans, and some that's seen and done a lot more than I have. And wish you well with them, and because they're good people, and I know some of the people you'll be interviewing, they've got a lot more horrific stories. My story was not a horrific story. I saw things, did things, but you can't unsee things, and that's just the way it is. But I just learn as much as you can about the war, but see that series and then take it for what it is. He did not give the American serviceman the credit that we felt like we should get. He spent more time really talking about Canadian draft dodgers going to Canada, you know. And who knows? You know, if I hadn't gotten drafted, I may have gone to Canada, but I don't think so.
I want to thank you very much for taking
Thank
time
you.
with us.
Thank you.
Thank
History
you.
is beautiful, and just grab it, hold on, because there's so much. There's so much. And also, I think that probably,
Did you write all that
if
down?
y'all get any
Yes.
kind of time, write down a little bit of your experience that you have here so that your children can look back on that.
Okay.
I
Because
think she's right.
that's your legacy that you're leaving, and what an opportunity
gonna
that
give
you
you this.
had versus maybe they won't have or they will have, but they can look back and build on something that is a good thing. We
This,
appreciate it so much for
this
you
is
giving us this time.
my story,
Thank you.
and
When
it
he's
really
done, just show me, walk you
encapsulates
back to
everything
the
that you've got,
So
okay?
you can speak with Michelle.
All the way through, my feelings, what I did, what I earned, and all that other good stuff.
Thank you.
I saw on the paper that you bring that, or pictures. I chose not to bring pictures,
Okay.
but,
Thank you.
that is in my memoir book, which is in here. And do y'all like Billy Joel? Y'all probably
Billy Joe.
don't know who Billy Joel is.
No.
Oh, God. What an age difference, okay.
Can I see the picture on the front?
Huh?
Can I see the picture on the front of the book? Aw.
That's my lady right there. Now, but that, be sure and tell
Miss Schaefer.
Ms. Schaefer that you've got that. And
Okay.
And have you all spoken with Ms. Schaefer in regards to submitting this to the Library of Congress?